How many of you guys feel like you're building a shiny new rocket? Raise your hands. Feel like you're building a rocket? Think those are pretty cool, right? Well, we did have rockets back in the 80s, but we also had these. We're not able to do the GIF because I want to get all the video in the screen. But anyway, how many of you guys would love to ride off into the sunset, ride off into victory on your own dog dragon? Does it sound pretty good? Oh, we got more hands up for that one. Awesome. Well, we could talk about going really fast and how cool it would be to have a rocket, but there's an old African proverb that's one of my buddy's favorite that may not be joining us today. This is him here in the middle. His name's Eric. You guys have heard this, though. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. We're going to be talking about why that is so important and who you choose to undertake the journey with. Absolutely. This is, one of the things I wanted to talk about with Eric is he's got quite a bit of personality. And I think in venture, when you're building a startup, you're a founder, I think you should not be afraid to be a little bit colorful. So here on the left, this is Eric's girlfriend after they decided to start a Somali healthcare center in Minnesota. No laughs? Okay. I think it's funny. It's not funny how much that's cost us as a country. All right, live translation. You guys seen this Apple ad before, right, where they now can live translate while you're talking? This says, I'm a founder. When I hear this, usually, especially the rooms I'm in, I know they're about to ask me for money. There you go. I stole this from Eric, though, and I just changed the wording up there. And then this is Eric's MacBook. You see all those tabs? This is him saying that ADHD has got nothing on him, and his laptop can't compete with him. There we go. Eric's a really unique individual with the way that he builds communities. He does a lot of crypto. He does a lot of side events all over the world. And it's pretty cool, some of the graphics he comes up with. This was way cooler when it was a GIF and it could move, but we had to make some sacrifices for the YouTube audience. All right, this is Mr. Eric. Eric should be here, but he's a slacker, so he's not. But he creates really incredible experiences. And I like what he said here. I bring your wildest ideas to life, whether it's art, music, fashion, events. And he does them all over the world. Vegas is one of his favorite places to do that. He was up extremely late last night, so we don't know what's going on. All right, Eric's favorite things. I'm going to take a minute because as a community builder myself, I could expound on these. His favorite three things are community, ecosystems, and ownership. Now, how many of you guys think ecosystems and community are actually the same thing? Yeah, there's crossover for sure. I think community, though, is that sense where people feel that they belong, they feel encouraged, they feel if they make a mistake, which we all will, they fail. I was talking to one of the ecosystem builders in the Caribbean, Sebastian, and he was saying that their culture there is one where if you fail, you're done. As an American, yeah, people are nodding they're shaking their heads saying, no, that can't be the case. We are extraordinarily lucky to live in an ecosystem here in the United States where the communities inside of that celebrate failure, especially if we show up in a certain way, taking ownership, and continue to move forward. So I think that's pretty freaking incredible. So community, I think, is something that does not necessarily always exist if you're building ecosystems, but I think that community is a critical component of any great ecosystem. Why do ecosystems matter so much? Ecosystems matter because they are what create a network effect. When they're done right, they help get the founder and their project out of the nest, right? So ecosystems, this is actually the entire North Star for everything that we do at my venture studio, my accelerator, all of the investment stuff that we do. We're always looking to build ecosystems. Kurt, why do you do so many events in Dubai? And why do you do stuff in Colombia and all these other places? We're constantly doing events. We're constantly doing events because we need to build ecosystems. Now, the definition of an ecosystem that works really, really well is one where the resources are able to make it to the founder so that they get supported. So think of it this way. Why is Silicon Valley so successful? Because they create a network effect around their ventures. Talent moves there. You have a lot of experience. You have an air of expectation with exits. You have employees that randomly are angel investors, right? That starts to create an ecosystem where the network effect, the more talent, the more experience, the more liquidity, the more raw innovation starts to compound on itself. And so one of the things that we're working on with Venture Forge and the other projects that we have is creating these whether the city is on board or not. I don't mean just Vegas. I mean any city that we're operating in. Ownership. Eric had probably a different word for this, this is the number one thing I look for in a founder I want to fund is their ownership. You guys are going to hear from two gentlemen today that took extreme ownership, and they were able to do some pretty incredible things. I titled today's experience around how do you take 8 years and compress it into 3 years and create those kinds of results. I'm going to posit to you guys that requires massive amounts of ownerships. There is no excuses. It's all your fault. Now, the beautiful thing about it always being your fault is that means you're always in a place of power to be able to do something different, right? Create a different experience. All right, these are just a couple of excerpts from Eric's very cool, very stylish events. He did a big event in Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore that I was going to have him expand on. Luck. How many of you guys think that founders just get lucky? Be honest, raise your hands. Okay, yep. I certainly am willing to say, and I believe there are no accidents. That's just what I believe. So I do think there's a heavy amount of serendipity and synchronicity. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was flying back from Colombia here to Vegas. I've been looking for new mountain bike buddies in Colombia so that I can be safe when I'm out doing our crazy thing. I happen to sit next to a rabid mountain biker that's going to take me on trails. I don't think that happened for an accident. It was incredible and it was awesome, and I'm super happy about it. Something about I chose to take that flight at that time. I almost changed my seat. I didn't, and this happens to me often, very frequently. And whether you guys believe in God or religion or just the source, I actually kind of sometimes will say, who do I need to meet today? Who do I get to serve today? Who am I meant to be able to sit next to? And that's something that I try to think of. All right, the reason I bring up luck, guys, is I think this is what luck actually looks like. How many of you guys are looking really closely and you see that in all these other, you can barely see it. There's people in each of these quadrants. They're all sleeping. What's this person doing? They're at it. They're working. And I think that you create your own luck, absolutely. All right, without a further ado, guys, we have a little bit more time today. So I want everybody to be thinking about questions that they have for this dynamic duo, because we're going to try to get to some of what they have going on. I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Matthew Cox here from Las Vegas, please. Yes, give him a round of applause. Absolutely. And then we're going to welcome Mr. Dan Cox as well from Utah. Do you guys know sometimes when you meet a founder and you can see it in their eyes, they're going to get it done? Yesterday, Alicia and I and some of our family office team was actually listening to a set of founders pitch, and I was back channeling my sister saying, this founder is not a visionary founder. This founder does not have the eye of the tiger. This founder is selling a feature, not an entire company. We should be honest with them and tell them if they can get a 7 or 8 figure check through us from a buyer, they should take it. And I don't know, we haven't been quite honest with them yet that that's kind of what we're thinking, but it's a vibe, it's a feeling that you can absolutely have. And I think that founders that get things done, make things happen, that have a real passionate connection to the problem they're working on are the ones that you can get behind and back. It might be a little too personal, but Dan has all kinds of excuses as to why he should not be here today. I'm going to let him share that really briefly, but he still chose to be here with you guys today. And this was a several $1,000 experience this morning to come down to Vegas. So I want you guys to listen very carefully, not just because of the experience these guys have, but because they really chose. I think 9 times out of 10, any other founder, any other investor, anyone would have said, hey, I got to be with my family, I got to deal with this. Mr. Dan, will you please tell us a really quick story of what you experienced this morning and how you're here getting it done, pouring into these individuals?
Yep, I think maybe leaning into what you said on ownership, the commitment was to come down and to speak and to share our story, but I woke up at about 7 o'clock to stepping out of my bed in a puddle of water. So somehow during the night, I guess my fridge line decided to pop. And in a course of 8 hours, it decided to flood our entire house. And so I thought that was quite an interesting task to take on. In my head, as I stepped down, I thought, I've got to start getting ready or I'm going to be late to get to Vegas. But we scrambled real fast, did a bunch of shop vacuuming and sucked up that water and did what I could in the short time that I had, and then had my wife call another company to come in, which is where the several $1,000 comment came from, because if I could have stayed home, I would have just handled it myself. But commitments matter, right? Ownership matters. When people count on you, you have to step up to that challenge and figure out solutions to what might be in the background. And I think that's what today was another theme of that same, reoccurring theme for us.
How many of you guys, yeah, absolutely, round of applause, absolutely, 100%. We're very grateful that you're here. How many of you guys know founders that exit companies that were policemen before that? Nobody? Never? Yeah, it's a little strange. Can you explain that one, Mr. Dan, before we get to introducing your brother?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of different careers, but one of my longest stints was in law enforcement. I was in the Department of Corrections in Utah, spent a lot of time there, was cross-deputized as a U.S. Marshal and was on a violent joint apprehension team where we would go and take down criminals that were in the community. And
Sounds delightful, doesn't it?
Spent a lot of time, training in that world, thinking about those type of aspects. Nothing that I felt like was connected to business, entrepreneurship, ownership of a company. But I actually did do a TED Talk where I talked about this journey from switching to this typical job, typical career into entrepreneurship and how it bridged over. But I did find that path. But yes, I was pretty deep into a traditional career as a law enforcement officer until I jumped into entrepreneurship.
Let's hear from the other member of the band. Yeah. Mr. Matthew, tell us real briefly about what you did before all the stuff we're going to dig into today.
Well, I was, on top of that, I started my career just helping kids. I was a soccer coach, and then it led me into foster care, so that's where my career started.
You guys are a couple of weirdos. Foster care and cops to multi-million-dollar exits.
Yeah, so
pretty cool.
So my first company was foster care, and then from there I moved to Vegas in 2009, exited that company, came here, realized the healthcare system here is like the Wild West. Really crazy. It was nuts in 2009 up to now. Started our first outpatient in 2012, me and my wife, and then Dan came in about 2016, right? He came with a good idea, and we'll get into that. But it's been a 20-plus year in healthcare system.
So there's three, maybe four businesses that I can think of, verticals as a startup investor that I will tell startup founders you should maybe not consider doing them. Healthcare is one of them. It's usually the first one because of all the regulation that keeps you from moving as fast as you want to move. Second would be anything hard tech, right? Hard tech, we actually have to produce something, especially if it's super intricate. Third, I would say, are data centers. Extremely anything with attached to the AI supply chain on any of those levels, where it's at the frontier model, which would be your Claude, your whatever, or whether it's at the application layer, or even further down, whether it's chipsets or actually the data centers. That's really, really tough, right? And then third, I would say the dual-use defense space, which is one of our favorite spaces we like to invest in. And it can be very, very challenging because you're building very complex things, and the sales cycles to get the funding are even longer than traditional cycles when it comes to raising money, right? So don't always recommend that. You guys have something kind of intentional that you guys talk about that I want to dig in before we move on. You guys are brothers, but that's not the reason you started a business together. So can you walk us through the intentionality of why you guys chose to be co-founders together?
Well, I can start that off and hand it over to Dan. So I actually started the outpatient first, and it was kind of getting flatlined. So we built it as far as we could. And as a visionary, you can only hit so much. We have kind of a joke that I'm Walt Disney, he's Roy. And so I'm very visionary. I can make connections and do all those things, and I open a lot of doors. And Dan says he comes in and closes the deal because he's very detailed. So I approached him in about 2016. Actually, he came to me. I said, I need you, because my wife helped me scale that business, but we needed to have some entrepreneurial skill sets that would go to that next level. And so the reason we kind of started down this path is, I think, because we come from 12 siblings, just so you know, and Dan's the youngest, I'm the middle.
If one is good, 12 is better, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, cheaper by the dozen. But the biggest piece of it is that you can't always do business with family. Everybody hears that, right? In the 10 years of our career together, it's been about 10, I think we had one argument. It was my fault because I'm the ADD kid, right? The sky was falling. Dan's very calm and collective. And I think I hung up and then called back and said, okay, I was just freaking out. We're good. And so it's very hard to do that because what Dan did and I do, we let each other be who we are. Does that make sense? he has a skill set that I let him, and I do my thing, and it's a very good compliment. You want to add to that? Or?
I mean, yeah, just to dive in, I think anytime that you're looking to add somebody to your picture, a lot of times the founder is a solo run, and it because there's just not enough to give away, and so you're really running this solo. But anytime you're faced with that decision of do I add somebody, you really have to be intentional. And Matt was at that place. I mean, he had no reason to have to add me, but I think his intentionality behind it was to see what I could bring to the table that he was lacking. He's the visionary, and I get very, very into the weeds when it comes to systems and operations and execution. And that matters when you're trying to find the combination that can help you scale. So don't just co-found with anybody because they're your friend. Don't co-found because they're your family. You co-found with strategy and with intentionality is what I would say.
Yeah, so we're going to keep this moving. So guys, I know this is a fundraising session. We're here at Who's Got My Money. So why are we talking about go-to-market? So in my estimation, if you don't get to market, you don't have anything. You've got a hobby, not a business. So let's just define what go-to-market means. In a world of infinite possibilities with limited time and limited resources, how do we choose to get to market today, tomorrow, and into the future? Marketing is the largest part of go-to-market, but it is not the only part. And go-to-market does not have a beginning and an end. It's endless. It's infinite. Every time you add a new line of business, you have a new channel partnership, whatever it is, you're adding to that go-to-market. If I want to put it from a fundraising perspective, go-to-market is 80% of your challenge in building a successful company. And I'll also say something else for those that are paying attention to AI. I believe that AI is starting to flatten product. Product and software and all of that has historically been, who's a non-technical founder? Raise your hand. That's me. We're going to see the rise of the non-technical founder because now with vibe coding, we can get something 70% of where it needs to go. It's not there yet. Give us a couple of years and it will. So if product is no longer a barrier that it used to be, and I say it's been the barrier's been flattened, that means the only thing left is go-to-market. So go-to-market is 80% of your ability to fundraise. You must build something that you verify and you validate that the market wants to buy. Super, super critical. You do that right, 80% of your fundraising job is done because capital will want to chase you. This is the part that founders want to skip. But Kurt, I got a product. How many people did you talk to? Oh, 5. Okay, come back to me when you've talked to 300, to 500, to 1,000. It's that amount of upfront work that founders wanted to sit in the back cave and not actually worry about their problem they're trying to solve and potentially the solution surviving contact with what clients actually think, right? Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff that these guys have given me. I'm going to read it out loud, and they're going to give us their backfill commentary on it, right? So the first thing they told me they did, and some of this is so good, guys. Seriously, I hope you guys understand how awesome this is. We didn't launch on hope. That pretty much rules out most founders, right? Okay. And we launched on proof. Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that made this possible was a lot of the foundational work that Matt had done. He had been in the Nevada market, scoping it out, building relationships, trying to figure out what the hole was, what was the market gap at the time. And when he approached me, I was already somewhat in the residential and the healthcare space, trying to work out the details of what it looked like to provide services there. And Matt had come to me and said, look, I keep getting approached by everyone in my network that says, we don't have this particular service. How do we fill that gap? And we spent, I want to say, almost a year researching that particular gap to find out how do we get it funded, what are all the regulations around that, what licenses are required, what is the type of staffing body that we would need, what are the operational components that would have to be in place to be successful. And we spent so much time on finding out, should we even step into that gap? Is there a possibility to even fill that gap inside our market, which at that time was Nevada? And we had to build it off of course, what Matt had already experienced through his research at that time.
We're going to have Matt take the next one. Hey, guys, you don't have a year to figure out the problems we're solving. They're in healthcare. They have much, much more. They have many, many more hoops they have to jump through, right? If you're going to figure out if you're working on the right problem to get problem fit and potentially build a minimum viable experiment, don't think about minimum viable product. You don't have time for that. Not in this current situation with AI. And what you think minimum viable product is not what you think it is. That's usually at your Series A round when you have a business model that's already making money, it's been proven, and now you need a bunch of gasoline. So think minimum viable experiment and be thinking about problem fit. Is the problem a fit for what we're trying to do, our capabilities, and does the problem that we think that these clients and customers have, are they willing to say this is immediate, painful, and I'm going to pull out my credit card? The next one is we validated demand first. We validated demand first. We validated demand first. We validated demand first. This means the market was crystal clear with them, screaming at them, we want to buy, and then we built the program to match the real need. We validated the demand first. Guys, I travel all over the world, and this is the part that founders think they can skip. Matt.
Yeah, so a lot of the groundwork I did for years. Remember, I came in 2009, and this is, by the time we did this, is 2006, so I had a lot of groundwork. 2016. I just went back a few years. And so here's the thing is that we did validate it because I sat on a lot of boards, and I really encourage founders to do this, is networking is your mother of everything. It's going to give you access to things and validate it.
But you guys were intentional about that.
Yes, and I was very intentional where I was and who I was talking to. So I went and met with people and validated it. I says if this was it, because we were pioneering something. Pioneering is not always the funnest thing. Because when you're the first in the market, there's going to be a lot of growth pains. So to validate, we went and made meetings, we talked to people, we checked in and got yes, 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 yes.
We just did a whole YouTube, for the new YouTube channel on being first versus being second and the pros and cons for that. Okay, next on the go-to-market list, gentlemen, we kept the model simple enough to execute. This sounds like, well, of course, but it's brilliant. Who wants to take this one?
Yeah. Albert Einstein says you should make everything as simple as possible, but no more simple than it can be, right? So healthcare is complex in its own way. Our objective was to find out how do we simplify such a complex industry, and a lot of work went into that, a lot of system design, a lot of process design went into what it looked like to execute on the particular area that we were going to go into when it came down to healthcare. I think you really have to challenge yourself. Every time you create something, you should ask, is it simple enough? And at some point, you're going to say, I can't make it any more simple at this point. But you have to keep asking that question. Is it simple for my referral partners to understand? Is it simple for the clients that I'm going to serve? Is it simple for the staff that I'm going to hire? I think we definitely went through a lot of that process to make sure that we were really comfortable with that in such a complex industry.
Matt has something really cool on this that I want to have him share. How many of you guys understand how complex it is to build a behavioral center? Can you talk about how essentially this is its own hotel, its own micro city, just so you can understand the complexity that they then had to make simple?
Yeah, so most lift ups, you're doing one aspect. We were doing about 4 or 5. So we had to do kitchen, we had to do hotel, what he's saying is living, we had to do also staffing, and it was a 24/7 event. So in that process, we probably lost about 5 years of our lives because I never slept. I was on the night shift making sure everybody was there. So having all these functions this is a very complex business and industry, and it's hard. It's not for the faint at heart. So we were managed. I had to go and learn kitchen. I had to go learn passing certain things that you didn't. When we went into it, I didn't know I was going to have to learn how to meet with a healthcare inspector. So as an entrepreneur, as you're hearing this, when you start something, the business, you think you're going this line and you end up over here and over there. And so we learned a lot of things in the process. It was very growth aspect.
So this 8 years and 3 years, where do you guys think I got that? I got that from Dan or Matt. One of the two of them said this to me when I very first met them. Now, this was a euphemism. This was not a like, hey, we're all excited we did it in 3 years. It's we're pretty sure we aged ourselves 8 years and 3 years. I decided to turn it around and say, look at the speed at which they were able to move. Early success was not about being fancy. It was about being clear. Anything quickly you guys want to say on that?
That's good on that.
Yeah, clarity drives execution. So if if you can't get clear, one, going to market, we had to get in front of people to find funding. We had to find opportunities to convince people to come to Nevada to run the operations. And we had to be extremely clear on what it looked like for them to join our opportunity. And that clarity was able to create the consistency and the speed that we needed to uplift everything and to get the licenses that we needed and to start the operations. So don't skip on clarity. If you can't explain what you're attempting to do, and you can't get somebody excited to fly across the nation to come join your team, at least in our world, we knew we had more work to do to clarify that.
So 2 thoughts on this. Every time somebody meets you, you should have a 2-liner. I do this, we serve this, and this is how we do it. It should be very, very simple and very clear. And use that as feedback. If they can't quickly figure out what you're doing, it's too complicated. Mm-hmm. You have an opportunity all the time to be able to get that first try. Also, you're weaponizing the world by saying, this is what I do, and then they can figure out how they might be able to serve, and they will remember that you're the person that does that. You also have an opportunity to enroll every single person you meet into your cause, into the direction and the velocity of where you're going. As I've told many of the thousands of founders we deal with in our accelerator, that the resources, relationships, and capital you seek is sitting in the warm market of other people that you meet. Every time you meet somebody, capital will always come through a relationship. A human being is writing you a check. You need to remember that. Okay, I love this one too. We sold trust, not marketing. This deserves an answer.
I think this is where I came in, because as the marketer for the organization, I sold the trust. And in this industry, it's all about trust, because you're dealing with bureaucrats, and you're dealing with a lot of different things.
And somebody's loved one.
And somebody's loved one. And so you have to really define what trust is. It's making sure your value system, and part of scaling, Dan and I do scaling as Bloom coaches, and one of the things is you have to be a value-based organization. And what that means is you lead by values, you hire, fire, and promote, and that's where you scale trust. Because if you as a founder say this and you do left, a lot of people watching you are going to say, well, this doesn't make sense because what you're saying is not what you're doing. Does that make sense? And so what we did with the trust is we did what we said and said what we did, and we really put that as part of our forefront. So values are extra. Get your values down, because when you're talking, that's going to help you know why you're doing it. That's going to build the trust.
Super important. And I've experienced different versions of this from both Matthew and Dan. There's one that really comes powerfully to mind with Dan that I may bring up later. Our momentum came from credibility, relationships, responsiveness, consistency, and doing what we said we would do. Guys, I was just down in Columbia, and I sat down with the largest accelerator in the entire country and one of the universities, and I said, hey, they asked me what my experience was, and I said, absolutely love this country, spellbound by the mountains, the warmness of the people, the celebration of life. It's all wonderful. I said, however, the culture here in Colombia and in Latin America, outside of, just in general, is one of mañana, mañana, mañana. We'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow. No problem. I'm not going to change Latin culture. I'm not trying to. But when it comes to startups, they move at the speed of startups, no matter where you are. You either move at that pace or you don't. So I said, if Colombia wants to compete, which I very much hope it can, and I believe it can, it needs to do what it says it's going to do. Super, super important. And I know this sounds so simple, but this is so rare. Do you guys have some commentary on this one?
Yeah, trust led to us to being consistent, right? So if you can be trusted, going to what Matt was saying, if you can be trusted because you're guiding yourself through a value exploration and you're understanding every time you enter into a conversation, this is what you look like, then you're consistent. Consistency allows you to drive intense execution. Every time you're faced with a problem, every time something has to happen, if you are going to execute, you'll execute on the foundation of the trust and the consistency that you bring to the table every time. It's really hard to execute if you're always all over the place. And so if you want to show up, you have to own those other two parts, because extreme execution is what's going to ultimately get you to the finish line. It's going to give back the money that you asked for. It's going to give the returns that you said you were going to give. It's going to serve the people who you said you were going to serve because you chose to show up that day and execute. So
Just to add to that, so a lot of times Dan did the side of crisis or other things. So trust was anybody could call us on our team, and if it was anything to do with the facility, in 10 minutes I'd figure it out. I'd say, give me 10 minutes, I'll call you right back. But I would call back in 10 minutes. Does that make sense? And then they would call Dan when they were in a crisis or something was going system-wise, and he'd say, okay, give me a minute, let me figure it out. But he would call back and give the directions. What I see a lot with founders, they don't call back. And then what happens to your trust? It becomes a dentist with wooden teeth, right? You can't tell them to brush their teeth. They stop listening to you after a while.
Yeah, so let's talk about permission real quick. So as you do what you say you're going to do with other individuals, their level of permission grows where they're now opening themselves up to trust you with more and more serious, deeper and deeper matters. Does this make sense? People listen to the level of permission that they have given you. They don't even know that this is happening sometimes, right? And permission is usually, when I have an argument that goes south that I can't stop, it happens once or maybe 3 times a year, it's because the permission somehow has been lost. Or I have miscalculated the level of permission that I have with this individual, and thus their willingness to trust and hear me on whatever it is that I'm delivering. Now, there's certain things that in general I enjoy very high trust on. Somebody comes to me wanting to understand fundraising, they listen to me because they know I know exponentially probably more than they do. I've been doing it for 20 years. But an example of a lack of permission would be somebody trying to go learn about mountain biking from a snowboarder that's never been on a mountain bike before, right? But when you don't keep your word, you can start to erode the permission and the trust that you've earned. So that's key. Okay, we have a lot of amazing positive things to talk about that these guys have done, but we're going to talk about some of the ugly things. You guys down for that? Okay, I'm going to call this the climb, but this is them being very candid and admitting some of the things that they did wrong in this whole process. They carried too much personally for too long, which equaled slow scale. Even though they moved in 3 years, they're admitting that they carried too much slow scale.
Yeah, this all came down to Matt and I get really invested in people, right? We get really invested in the person that we thought was going to be the team member that was going to make something happen for us. And we were too slow to move on. And so we wanted to help them and we wanted to support them. We wanted to figure out a way that we could encourage them to grow as an individual and as a leader. And so we just needed to move past people faster once we realized that they were going to be the wrong people, but we sat with them too long. I think that was a big mistake of ours.
That's higher slow, fire fast.
Fire fast. And this is a hard concept because human beings, we want to stay with them. So we lost millions of dollars because of this. Because if you hold on to people, because when you have your executive team in the room, that's a lot of money. And if they're not moving the needle, you're going to lose out. So when you're small, because we start out small, and then as we started growing in the revenue, and our revenue, we were doing 2 million, 3 million. Because remember, we're just these small town boys that we just had an idea, and then all of a sudden you do a tax return. Whoa, what happened? We just blew up overnight.
How big was your staff?
Yeah. Staff at the top was 180. And it's 24/7, so you got to figure out. And then your turnover, I think our turnover in that industry was like 70%.
They live dog years, guys, dog years.
Yeah, so it was very high stress. So on this term of what we did wrong, and I would just encourage as founders, and especially as you're partnering somebody. We just fired one of our other partners on another business because he was just so negative and he'd drag his feet and you'd get in the weeds. We said, we're done. You know, it was after a year, but I think we still drug that on too long.
Still not learned.
Didn't strengthen the middle layer early enough.
Yeah. In healthcare, there's lots of layers to management, and so maybe some of you will experience this, maybe some of you won't. But our mid-level management in healthcare, I will still say this today, mid-level management is what makes or breaks a healthcare agency. And we didn't spend the time that we should have on the mid-level. They drive your culture in positive ways or negative ways. And a lot of times your executive leadership or your ownership mind thinks they're just replaceable. It doesn't matter. And so you don't invest a lot of time into the mid-level. And for us, we learned a little too late that the mid-level was probably 90% of our headache. For sure.
Yeah, and I think the problem here is we promote, all of us start somewhere in a career, and then you do really well at this level, and then they're like, hey, we're going to promote you now. And then they forget to give you the manual and then training. And we all get into that because in our industry, it was firefighting all the time. It was crisis management. And so we say, oh, we'll come back, and we forget to go back and train. So I think now you're running a facility now. How many employees you have? You've done something different, right?
Yeah, I'm back at 170.
170 right now. He has 2 facilities. You've really focused on that area, right?
Mid-level management.
Mid-level management.
So the next one we've got here is you underestimated how fast small inconsistencies become really big liabilities.
Yeah, so on your matrix, I'll give this to Dan. He's real good at this. But KPIs, if you don't find your small metrics, because everybody hears the word KPI, right? And they keep seeing the red, but they do nothing about it. So your health of your organizations are your KPIs. If you don't see the red and deal with it, every week, if you get 3 weeks and you keep seeing that red and you don't drop it down and make it an issue, you're going to see the damage. You're real good at this. I'll let you add.
Yeah, I don't want to hit this point too long, but what you permit is what you promote, and that's just as simple as you could keep it, right? If you're going to keep letting the small inconsistencies happen, every time you walk in a room, you say, oh, I know if that keeps happening, I'm going to have a problem, but you walk out of that room, you just permitted it to keep occurring. You're promoting that inconsistency, and it will catch up to you eventually. You have to solve those things in the moment. KPIs are the way that you do that.
So while I announce this next one, I want you guys to be thinking of the scariest thing that happened, because I know you guys had some individuals that were handfuls, is a nice way to put it. Scaled complexity faster than the infrastructure. This is a good problem to have. It's still painful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, growth can eat you sometimes way faster than trying to figure out how to drive revenue. When your demand becomes so fast in healthcare, that might be an influx of clients that come into the facility. So you have too many kids that come in or too many adults that come into this healthcare facility. Your staff weren't prepared for that, and so that growth starts to crumble. All of the systems that you assumed were solid, they start to fall apart because you didn't test that before that growth came in. So as entrepreneurs or founders, you have to think beyond this moment right now, and you have to ask yourself, what would it look like if this system was tested at this volume? And we failed a few times at doing that. Nothing that was catastrophic for us, but we were able to recover because, back to Matt's point, when something came up, we addressed it very fast. But we should have been testing systems constantly, because that growth did challenge us a lot. We crashed a few times and had to recover pretty quick.
I think on this, what helped us is Dan was very system driven. I was very culture driven. So when I seen something, I would come to him and say, because he was the acting COO, and so I'd say, hey, I'm seeing this. And the staff, I made friends with the janitor, because the janitor's in every room, right? And so you got to be very strategic when you're running a huge organization, because sometimes we ignore the janitors, but who's the best person to go to see what's going on with your culture? And if you do that, you create loyalty among all of them. And so I was always on there checking in, and then Dan would help. If we see a rel going somewhere, we do that better now and teach our clients to do it faster.
So what's your scary story for the crew?
So many of them. Which one do you?
Well, Dan, here's what Dan's going to do. Dan's going to tell us his fire. Speaking of starting fires, your favorite memory of Matt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Matt, I mean, this is back when we were a child, in our childhood. So it was right after 4th of July. So, of course, you always have leftover fireworks. So this is just an example of what he is still today, right? He's a problem solver, and he's a fixer, and he's a networker. But so back then, I probably was 9 years old. Who knows? I picked up an extra firework, opened the front door, lit it, threw it across the street into what I thought was no big deal. It landed next to a tree. It popped off. I thought that was cool. I shut the door, and within, I think, 15 minutes, I heard the fire truck coming up the road. So somehow that firecracker had landed next to a tree enough to where it was able to start the base of the tree on fire, and then it engulfed the tree. And so that whole tree was on fire. Matt came in, like I said, as consistent as he is today. talked to me about it. He knew a few people in the city somehow. I don't know how he knew people in the fire
He had
department.
started other fires.
You know, whatever he did, he solved that problem for me. He helped me navigate that, and so that was one of my favorite memories of just watching Matt go to work on solving a problem.
You got a favorite story of Dan or a scary story?
No, Dan's interesting. As you heard his career before, my story with him is Dan's always been the consistent one. And watching him, he always perfects everything. So we both love soccer. I coached soccer, and when he was younger, I forced him to coach with me. I grew up and made some poor choices as an adult or as a young lesson, so I was a little harder on my brothers because I didn't want him to go down that route. So I'd say, hey, you're going to come do this, you're going to come do that. And so I think he ended up liking soccer. Now you're coaching it. So what I found with Dan is with him, whenever you give Dan a project, he perfects it. Does that make sense? So like the state hated him because he would go read all the NSR codes, and he's a technical writer, so he'd understand it. So every time we get on a call with the state, what I appreciate about Dan is every state person would roll their eyes. Oh, crud, here's this Dan Cox. We're going to get everything thrown back at us.
We're about to get nailed.
Yeah, so it was really good. So I think what I really appreciate with him is it's kind of like Walt Disney and Roy. That is my story because Walt really leaned on Roy, if you ever read the biography, because Walt failed many times, and I have a lot of failures in my entrepreneuring. And when Dan joined me, that's when we were successful. And that's the same with Walt and Roy. When Roy took over Walt Disney went off the charts until he passed. So that's just something you have to think. That's Dan's skills.
So we got to keep moving here. So guys, one of the things that struck me about both of these guys when I first met them is how much they are operators. As a business development guy, as someone that is on the other end of the spectrum, I really respect operators. And as an investor, I'm always thinking to myself, is this person coachable? Are they aware of what they don't know so they know the enormity, right? There's what we know, there's what we don't know, and there's what we don't know that we don't know that we don't know, right? And that tends to be the largest portion of the pie, right? Especially as we get older. So the fact that these guys are great operators is something I really want to highlight here because this is absolutely critical. So here we go. We built a culture as an operating system, not a vibe. Go ahead, real quick on this one.
I think what Kurt's saying is really important for you guys to latch on to. There's that popular TV show with the investor people. What's that? Shark Tank or something, right? A lot of times when you watch that, they'll choose to invest because of the person that's standing in front of them, because mainly the defining factor that they look at is, can this person actually execute, which is operations, right? As founders, if you're so visionary and you can't get out of your head and you don't know how to operationalize this amazing idea that you believe is going to change the world, nobody wants to give you the money. Nobody wants to work with you because they can see through you. They can see that you don't know what operations look like. They don't want to give you the money because they know they're just going to burn it. Operations matters and culture matters. That's part of operations. If you can't run a team and you can't make them feel invested in the project that you're doing, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how great the idea is. Your culture will end up eating you alive because you don't know how to operate and everybody wants to run from you.
We're going to be talking more about culture because this is something they've done very, very well. We treated compliance and safety as a growth strategy. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'll just jump into this. I think everybody that works for you wants to have predictability. They want stability. The organization itself is its own entity as well. So we as humans want predictability, we want stability. Well, your entity wants the same thing. What do you need to do to give it compliance? What do you need to do to make sure that you're within regulations so that entity can be healthy? And that will hopefully translate into your staff and your culture.
There's so much to cover here, guys. I hope you guys are taking this in. We hired for values and trained for skill. Can't say enough about this one.
Yeah, when you're starting out, it's hard because you just need people, and so you hurry and rush it. So as you get down, we learned this later because we actually hired a lot of consultants and coaches. So what you don't know is what you don't know, right? And so you have to get the people in the room, and that's where I force Dan sometimes to hire people. He's like, well, I says, no, we're doing this. And so we hired us EOS implementer. We hired a lot of different ones. We became EOS implementers, but it's called Bloom. And so we love this part because if you don't hire with values, I have a client right now that's a big residential in Boulder City, and I sit down and I teach them value-based hiring. I learned this from Dan. If you don't ask the right questions and you can hire fast, but you got to fire fast too if you're going to do it that way. But what Kurt said earlier, your really prime key ones, you got to hire slow and make sure, because they're going to be leading the ship.
So it's funny, I'm probably going to build a foundation down in Latin America, and some of the investors that I had with me were asking why I was choosing certain individuals. And I said, I've watched carefully some of these individuals for 4 or 5 years. I've watched what they do when they're challenged. I've watched what happens when the chips are down, right? And they do the right thing. They do the brave thing. I said, you can't train that. So that would be training for, that would be hiring for values, that would be hiring for character. Skills, I can teach that. But these types of character traits, they are kind of rare, and that's what creates these amazing winning teams. We created scalable structure early.
Yeah, Matt mentioned this. I love systems, right? I always think in systems. So every time I built a system, I was asking that question. I mean, again, as Kurt said, we're compressing 8 years into 3 years. So we learned a lot and we made a lot of mistakes. And since then, I've constantly refined this thought process that I have. Every time I'm building a system, I'm asking myself, what does it look like when I'm 2 times as big as I am right now? What would need to change? Because the system will have to change, right? A car that's a small sedan has an engine just like a diesel does, but that engine is slightly different when it's in a diesel because its application is different. Your business will need to change, but the system is just morphing and adapting. But do you know what component needs to change? What would you adjust to make it to be successful in that new environment? And that's what I would say.
I'd like to hear Matt on this one, since I know he's one of the big communicators. We learn to communicate outcomes, not just features.
Yeah, the biggest thing is storytelling. If you don't tell stories why you're doing it, if you don't have the outcomes, it's hard. So like when we came into the industry, there was a lot of kiddos, because I've been doing this for years with troubled youth, and I think 90% of all the kids were out of state in other facilities. So what Dan and I did is we actually bring them all back into the state. And so we have to show those outcomes. And you have to see like the successes, and especially in this industry, it's really hard because the wins are very 1 and 2s. It's not big because it's a stressful industry, and so you have to tell stories. And so whatever industry you're in, it still applies, because if you don't tell stories and you don't do it, VCs won't look at you, funders won't look at you, because funders have hearts too. And when they get to that point, when they have the money, they're about doing cool things, but they want to know that it's going to have big outcomes.
Because we have so much to cover, I'm going to combine some of these. We're back to another operator slide. We treated operations as clinical quality, love that, and we did the unsexy work every day and every night, and tightened things fast.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that slide that Kurt showed, right, with the people sleeping in the 4 quadrants and the guy in the middle working hard. You just have to do the hard work. You have to wake up. You can't keep offloading everything to your team and then blaming them when it falls short. Like, you have to do the hard work and the things that you don't want to do to make sure you're successful.
Doesn't always sound sexy, but again, we're all the janitor when we first start these companies, right? Okay, next one. Operationalized the very first 90 days, training cadence, routines, and supervisional structure. Yeah, so mic back to Dan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for us, there's a lot of complex jobs that went into our industry. Building the job descriptions, building the KPIs that link to those job descriptions, making sure there's training manuals that go for that job. I mean, there was so much. It's just not, hey, I think you know how to do this. Like, let's just figure it out together. It was really thinking through all of those components. What would it look like for this person to join our team? I think you really have to, as a founder, you have to stop living in your world and thinking, what is everybody else going to do for me? It has to be, what am I going to do for this person if they choose to come be with me, and their hiring experience and their experience within your organization. So it was a lot of forethought and just trying to walk their shoes, I guess.
Matt, let me have you do this next one, because
Yeah,
this is you all over. Go ahead real quick if you had thought.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you got to remember visionary integrator. And so a lot of times when he would set those up, I would come in and do all the trainings and help do a lot of those things.
Yep, you would tell the stories, you get people excited and wrapped up in the opportunity out. Protected culture early with consistent standards and fast correction. Fast correction. That's super important. And I love this next thing. We didn't tolerate drift. What is drift, real quick, guys? One of the things that Napoleon Hill wrote about this in his books very long time ago. Drift is kind of the pull of the matrix, where it pulls you towards mediocrity. I think the human spirit wants to be excellent, but without attention, without intention, there's the drift where you get pulled towards the kind of the standard that most people operate in. And the standard that most people operate in does not create exits, does not raise millions of dollars, and does not create successful championship teams. What do you say on this culture piece?
So the culture started with us first.
Yeah.
So as a brother, I still remember the call. I was in my backyard when we decided to do this because he was a cop, so he was making, what, $34,000 maybe? That's probably too high. Maybe 30, I don't know. And I was running an outpatient, which was barely making it. We were doing good work, but we were making a good job. So I remember the culture started when we had this conversation, hey, we're going to do this. We don't know where it's going to go, but let's never let money become between us. Because when you don't have money and then you start having money, that's the culture. That's when it starts. So to translate to you as founders, no matter if you're in the tech or wherever, you need to have that conversation. If you don't have the culture at the foundation part, because we just had that partner we had to kick out because he kept drifting. There was a lot of drifting. And we said, no, we're not going that way. And so if you don't get it done, your organization is going to look like very bipolar if you don't find the foundation first.
Super key. Okay, we're gonna dig into the raise. We've got some really awesome gold here to still cover after all this too. So really simple, they raised $800K plus. They did about 5 pitches. Don't get excited, this is not average. If you're raising venture capital, expect to pitch 150 to 200 times to get your 5, 6, 7 investors. They took their time and they actually built the story and the narrative as they went. So when they pitched, they had a 20% close rate because they got one of those 5. It was a mixture of debt and equity and some things, and the group that ended up funding them, the debt, actually got to have some additional upside, so that's very awesome that they put that together. This is the most important piece on this slide. They raised this 800K plus one time, and then the rest was all execution. Any on this before we move on?
I mean, yeah, maybe as Kurt said, it is unique that this is all it took us, but it's not because it was unique in the sense of the work that got done. Matt is a networker, right? So as he was telling the story and as we were building and we were doing the market research and the gap analysis, he was almost in a sense vetting potential people who would be able to fund this. And so in his own mind, he was killing off potential pitches that we didn't need to go waste our time on, and he was very selective on the 5 that we ended up choosing to go towards. So I think ultimately, if we wouldn't have had him, we probably would have had to do tons and tons of pitches. We just got really lucky that we dialed it down with the background work that we had done.
Same thing with the healthcare network we're talking about starting, right? You're going out there, you're meeting with key people, you're getting consensus, you're getting them excited, you're seeding interest.
Yeah, so ours is unique because remember, I came in 2009, so I had a network. And then I also started kind of thinking this through. So like the other day, we were talking about building a big infrastructure here in Vegas. And immediately I already knew who to go approach. So if you build those networks over time, you can then do projects a lot quicker. If you're starting out, you're going to do the 150 pitches. But you can also be very smart because I see a lot of founders, what they do is they have a really big vision, but they haven't really cleared it out. Kurt says a lot about that. You got to really get it dialed in. So we're kind of unique in a sense.
So we've got a round 2 that's kind of fun to talk about. Matt and Dan are working on a number of projects we probably won't have time to get into that are of a larger scale. But Dan, after they exited the other company at 8 figures in 3 years, Dan had a round 2. So he's going to tell us real quick what his feedback is on some of the things that he took from his first success into the second one, because he turned it into an overnight success. I believe you took it to, was it 8 figures or 7 figures in the first 8 months? I mix up a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely, all those hard lessons that Matt and I learned. Of course, we also spent a lot of time learning what it looks like to coach businesses and to help them to scale. And so by the time I had a chance to become a local CEO, or what they call an area executive director over another healthcare agency, I had all those lessons that I had learned, and I was able to compress everything into a shorter time frame. And so within about 6 months, we went into the black. In the first year, so 18 months, we went into 7 figures with a profit margin in 7 figures as well. So we did everything that Matt and I did in the 3 years, I was able to replicate in half the time in 18 months.
And so as he took the position, because he got offers, he came with his non-negotiables and set them very, very early, set those expectations, those standards. Also, he focused on levers that actually drive financial health. Is there something to say on this one?
Yeah, going back to KPIs, right? The levers that matter. What are the things that you need your team members to do that drive revenue? So setting those systems up to make sure that every time a team member steps into the room or executes a task, it's going to be a lever that helps to drive the financial component. They might not know it, right? An entry-level staff, when you choose to let them do something that you strategically know drives revenue, they don't necessarily know that they're doing that, but from the lessons that you learn, and if you know how to operate, everything that you set up for every staff member should be a lever to financial success.
So you operated as a systems builder, not a rescuer.
That's right. Yep.
And to speak to this as a fundraising point of view, Dan's speaking music to VC's ears, because if you hear what he's saying, this is a lot of experience. So there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of scalers out there have never done what we've done. And 2 a.m, being up at figuring out how we're going to make payroll, or Dan flying to Reno and going to offices and making sure we get paid. All that stuff you don't see it. Like when you hear 8-figure exit, but you didn't see the pain in that. So what Dan did is he scaled this other company, and they gave him another facility. That was fun, right? They gave him another facility to rehab, and you're doing the same thing, right?
Okay, another thing you said is you designed for retention, not just for recruitment.
Yeah, give me the last point too, because I think that leads into
operated as a system builder, not a rescuer.
Yeah, so every person that joins my team, I get very clear on what their role is. I don't want to step into their space. If they're a mid-level management, I'm not going to come rescue them in that role, because I was intentional on building it, intentional on training them. And so then it dives into making sure that you're able to really hone in the execution once every team member's doing what you ask them.
And this last one, super important, addressed reality quickly to prevent drift, reinforcing the culture.
What you permit is what you promote, right? Every time something happens, you have to address that. What is that really going to mean? If that keeps going, how is it going to rip apart the system? And that allows you not to enter into organizational drift.
So there's people that can speak about things well, guys, and there's people that speak about things where it makes so much sense you can tell they're speaking from dramatic experience. I had an interaction with an individual that had done hundreds of millions of dollars in their business that Dan and I were working with, and Dan reframed the whole interaction and kind of the perception that individual was having as I was having conversations with them in a way that I could tell he'd really been in the trenches. So here's some sharing, guys. This is on the personal side. These are gems that these guys have earned from really having to dig deep as they help individuals through very traumatic and challenging situations. Dan said this: behavior is communication. I want you guys to think about that. As you're dealing with your staff, teams, significant other, family members, investors, behavior is communication. What is being communicated to you that you don't really understand? I know you probably have something to say about non-compliance.
I mean, in this sense, the lesson is that, when you're dealing with for us, it was a client in the healthcare space, their non-compliance is really just them communicating that there's something unstable for them. They need some type of stability, whether that's giving them reassurance or safety or security. Something needs to happen for them. So them just being defiant or not wanting to walk with you a certain way is really just them communicating that they need stability.
How many people think that's valuable for your staff and your teams to hear that? Super, super cool. Okay, you start asking different questions when you have these non-compliant experiences.
Yeah. I mean, for a staff member shows up late, a lot of traditional owners are going to be really upset about that. Maybe you ask the question, there's something that staff, that behavior, that's communicating to you something. There could be something going on in that staff's life. It could be that your culture is really kind of messed up, and so they don't really worry about showing up late. There's probably a ton of lessons that can be learned just by asking different questions instead of just going 0 to 60 and saying, I'm going to show you what you're going to do because you're my staff member.
I love this next one. It's so good. The staff nervous system is part of the clinical environment.
Yeah. For us, we have to have the staff feel the way that they show up is going to translate into how your product is delivered or your service is delivered, right? So the staff's nervous system, whether or not they're in victim mode, whether or not they're resistant to training, whether they're not in crisis mode, all of these components of the staff's nervous system is going to translate into how your product or your service shows up. So spend time on that.
Guys, as an investor, I am 1,000% paying attention to if the founder's in victim mode. I have no time in my life for people that are in victim mode, including myself. You can get nothing done, you can aspire to nothing, you can create nothing, you cannot be successful if you're in victim mode. And if you choose to be a founder, you literally have to check every excuse you've had in life as to why things are not turning out the way you want them to be at the door. You have no other choice. Okay, structure is compassion. Boundaries are stabilizing, not punitive. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think founders or even entrepreneurs, when we start a business, we think I'm going to create this fun environment and I'm just going to be the great guy that just helps everybody around me. I don't know, maybe there's a lot of ways that you could think about experiencing this, but at the end of the day, your company needs structure. The staff need to know what's expected of them when they show up. That brings a sense of security to them. It's not that you want to be you're rude or you're grumpy, although I was known as the kind of grumpy guy, right? Because I was the structure guy and Matt would go in and help him understand the emotional reason of what I was asking for. But it wasn't compromise. Matt didn't undercut me. He reinforced it by helping them understand the emotional side of why they needed that structure. But we didn't let up on it. We knew we had to have structure to create a business that could be scalable and then eventually be sold.
This is a great segue for Matt answering this next one. Your culture becomes clinical intervention.
Yeah, because your culture is everything. You die by your culture, and so you have to have a lot of interventions, like segues. But you have to create trust so people come to you. So like Dan said, he was very structured. I was very emotionally plugged in. And so that becomes your clinical, because if whatever you do, it doesn't matter if you make widgets, it doesn't matter where you're going in the tech world, because I'm very temperament driven, so everybody has a certain type of personality. And if you let one type of personality come over, if you want to use that word, you're going to have a lot of issues.
So guys, these guys have become experts in mental health. How many of you guys think founders don't get to talk about or understand or share or express the challenges of building a startup with mental health, right? So here's some gems that these gentlemen have to share with us. Mental health is health. It's not a character flaw. Do you have anything you guys quickly want to say on this?
Yeah, it's just like we've heard that saying, you're brushing your teeth. I've been doing this over 20 plus years. Mental health is your health. I mean, we spend so much money on the body and so little on the mind, and we have to do integration and looking at it to where what you do every day, your routines. And I think the biggest issue we're having with mental health today is those fun devices we have. It's changed the way we interact, and everybody's really starving for this, like coming to things like this and having that interaction. Do you have any?
This next one's awesome. Symptoms are often survival strategies that have stopped working for us.
Yeah, I think the same thing for you as a founder. How are you showing up in the room? If people give you feedback, what really is that telling yourself that you need to work on? Once you really can understand yourself, you show up better in investor meetings and in pitches. When you're looking at a staff member that's giving you some type of behavior, what is the symptom that they're really giving you? I think these are all signs. If you're curious, if you truly are curious, and again, like I said, if you'll take yourself out of your moment and out of your world, and you start to ask yourself, what is happening right now for that person? How are they experiencing me and how am I experiencing them? That curiosity builds the relationship that you need that might ultimately be the reason you become successful.
This last one's, I think, excellent as well, and I've seen it to be true. Recovery is not willpower. It's environment plus relationships plus repetition.
Yeah, if we're talking about recovery as far as when you're doing things, your relationship, and that's where I think I've succeeded, is your relationships are everything. If somebody calls me and says, I need to, like I just had somebody call from way in the middle of the rural areas and said, I need somebody in a hospital tomorrow or now. It says, give me an hour and I'll find something. And within the hour, that trust is built because I make sure we follow through again. So I'm going back to that concept. So it's really making sure, and I think I'm trying to, can you?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm trying to figure that question out. So biggest thing is just making sure that you're really diving into the relationships. Relationships are everything. People won't invest into your company unless they trust you or you have a relationship. All VCs I've dealt with, they say, why? I ask them, I say, why did you invest into that? They said, because I really like the CEO. Because they're going to be married to you for a while and they got to like you.
Guys, we started this conversation talking about the power of community and ecosystems. I would submit to you that your environment and the relationships plus repetition is what creates the network effect that can be so powerful from ecosystems, right? And from community, which is the relationships component. So that is absolutely critical. What's the future look like for you, Dan? What's the future look like for you, Matt?
I mean, for me right now, I'm a strong operator still. I'm very into that world right now. I operate, mental health facilities right now, so I continue to be there, showing up for my staff members, showing up for the entity that I work for. Matt and I are very passionate about helping business owners, so we do a lot of consulting, a lot of business coaching right now. That's definitely a huge passion for me, is to get into a room with an owner, with a founder, and a few team members, and really show them what it looks like to build a healthy team. We spend a lot of time in that space right now as well, and I find a lot of joy in that.
For me, I'm doing a lot of the scaling. So as a scaler, we have a company acceleration, which we do go into businesses. So I have a lot of facilities. I'm in those every day. I'm helping small companies come from a startup. So I have one that they've probably dumped about 300,000 so far as of today. So I'm there a lot helping them through that, because a lot of issues come up, and so they'll hit us up and we'll work through that. But I usually run their weekly meetings. I get their weekly meetings going, their KPIs going, and then because we've probably seen everything you think of. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. The principles are universal. So it's fun because we have a lot of different industries. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. You guys are working on some hospitals?
We're working on a project here. We designed a hospital about 3 years ago. We were going to build it during COVID. It was 90 beds. What this hospital would do is it'd be a teaching hospital for psychiatric and bring innovation to it. So that's a fun project. And it's going to be innovative, but the biggest thing in raising things like that is finding the right VCs again, because you want to have the right people.
Yeah, so we're working on a kind of a healthcare vertical where we can help refine those that are active practitioners, help them with AI, help them to understand what they need to be doing to market, their companies. And then as we move further down the funnel, those doctors that raise their hands and say, hey, I want to be a founder, or even, hey, I have money, I would like to be a check writer and like to write checks into healthcare. So that's something that we're working on building. If you guys would like to connect with the Cox boys, we have Mr. Dan over here. You can click on this to get his LinkedIn. You can get Mr. Matt's here, and then of course you have mine. Welcome to Who's Got My Money, everybody. So come on down and get a group picture with us, and we'll enjoy some lunch. And give the Cox boys, please, another round of applause. I think they have given you some crazy, crazy, crazy advice today that is super valuable.